Hi everyone, my name is Kamryn Ford and today I will be discussing the opioid crisis. Many of you probably have heard a few things about the opioid crisis, but many do not know the extent of what has happened over the past years. It's for this reason that I will be discussing the policy and the quality on the issue, as well as how pharmaceutical companies and doctors have played a role in the issue, and how the public perceives the issue and why that needs to change in order to better the future for drug users. I thought it was important to start with some background information so that we're all on the same page before we begin the argumentative side. Opioids are highly addictive pain medications that can be prescribed by doctors or bought illegally. Opioids originated from the plant opium starting in the 1800s when Chinese immigrants first showed Americans how to smoke the plant. The Drug Enforcement Administration Museum during this time called it a joy plant because it was thought to be safe and have magical powers on whoever smoked it. Since then, we have learned many things. According to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, 10.3 million Americans misused prescription drugs in 2018. It is estimated that 130 individuals die from an opioid-related overdose every day in the United States. According to the American Drug Overdose Epidemic, more than 60% of those drug overdoses began with a doctor's prescription. Doctors and pharmaceutical companies are creating drugs and know the real-life implications that they are addictive and dangerous. But you may ask yourself, what makes these drugs so dangerous? I found myself asking the same question since many other drugs are considered safe and effective for thousands of people. Take marijuana, for example. It's extremely unlikely that anyone would overdose from marijuana, and it's used for many medicinal purposes. The difference is that opioids are synthetically created. While I originally said before that they were created from the plant opium, that has now changed because pharmaceutical companies found a way to synthetically create these drugs, making them cheaper and easier to manufacture. According to the World Health Organization, the chemicals found in the synthetically created opium are ones that can slow your respiratory functions, which could ultimately lead to death and is what causes these overdoses. It is estimated that 45% of opioid drug users will experience a drug overdose during their time using. So who or what is the root of this problem and how can they fix that? Doctors have learned the detrimental side effects that opioids have caused, yet still continue to prescribe them. In an interview for the AMA Journal of Ethics, MD Ronald Hirsch states that doctors often prescribe 30 to 60 pills when 5 to 20 would have been adequate. But why would these doctors be prescribing so many pills when they know that the side effects are extremely dangerous and could cause their patient to be chronically addicted? The answer ties in with pharmaceutical companies. In a Harvard Medical School study, they found that in 2014 and 2015, opioid manufacturers paid hundreds of doctors sums in the six figures, while thousands were paid over $25,000. This means that doctors are being paid large amounts of money to prescribe unnecessary amounts of a highly addictive pain medication, so that pharmaceutical companies will be getting more money in the end because their patients will come back for more drugs when they find themselves addicted. Pharmaceutical companies need to be stopped. Prying on individuals when they're at their weakest should be considered criminal and is not fair to anyone who is trying to get better. Pharmaceutical companies instead need to be working together with patients and doctors to find safe and effective treatments. This can be done in one of many ways. The most important part is that some of these pharmaceutical companies have been sued for hurting these individuals and causing them pain and suffering. Using that money that they are sued for, they could instead target it towards creating new, safe, and effective drugs and testing them to make sure that they will be effective and less addictive in the long run. The next topic I want to talk about is how the public perceives this issue. Many believe that's a criminal issue and not a mental health issue. But I want every one of you to take a moment and think of the first thing that comes to mind when you think of a drug addict. Oftentimes, when we're dealing with the opioid crisis, the public's idea of drug addicts does not meet the reality. These people can be teachers, a parent, a friend, or an athlete who suffered an injury that may have required surgery, and ultimately their pain management option was prescribed for opioids. People know that addicts are buying these drugs illegally on the streets, and that's why they believe that it is a criminal issue. But the reality is, many of them believe this is their only option to survive, is to keep getting that drug, because addiction is an illness. The body thinks that you need these opioids to continue living. So instead of throwing these people in jail where there's no treatment options, no way for them to get better, they're going to keep going back to the street, finding more drugs once they get out, and the cycle continues over and over again because they aren't getting the help they need and there's no way to treat it. Instead, we need to treat this as a mental health issue and find more options for rehabilitation centers for people to go to receive the treatment that they need. One way this has been completed in the real life is by safe stations. Safe stations are few and far in between, which is part of the issue. They are treating this as a mental health issue, which is the first step that we need to take in changing the perception of the opioid crisis, and I think that is the most important part, is treating it as the mental health issue. Safe stations do one of many things. First of all, they are fire stations that drug users can go to drop off old needles in exchange for new needles. This is an attempt to slow the transmission of certain diseases such as hepatitis or HIV that are commonly passed through dirty needles that are shared by multiple individuals. The second and most important part is that safe stations are used for drug addicts to voluntarily turn in their drugs, turn in their needles, and from there a police officer or a firefighter will escort them to the nearest treatment center where they can receive the help and treatment that they need. This is important because it allows these drug users to get a second chance. When you're throwing them in jail, it's not giving them a second chance, and instead, like I mentioned before, the cycle will continue and they won't get better. But this is the first step that we can make. Too many lives have been taken and this issue is not going away. If you took anything from my speech, I hope that it's that opioid addiction is a mental health issue and that doctors and pharmaceutical companies are the ones that need to begin the real change and find safe and effective treatment options for their patients. Thank you.